On the night of November 12, 1966, the air in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, hung heavy with a sense of unease. Near a local cemetery, 5 men were digging a grave for a weekend burial. Suddenly, a dark, human-like shape rose from the nearby trees. It wasn't a bird, and it wasn't a man. It soared silently over their heads, its immense wingspan casting a fleeting shadow that chilled them to the bone. They stared, frozen, as the figure disappeared into the darkness. They didn't know it then, but they were the first witnesses to a year-long reign of terror. 3 nights later, on November 15th, 2 young couples were driving near the abandoned TNT area, a place the locals knew to avoid after dark. Roger and Linda Scarberry were in the car with Steve and Mary Millette. As they passed the old power plant, their headlights caught something truly horrifying. 2 enormous, glowing red eyes stared back at them from the shadows. The eyes belonged to a creature standing by the roadside, a creature unlike anything they had ever seen. It was about 6 or 7 feet tall, with a muscular, man-like body, but its most terrifying feature was the massive pair of wings folded against its back. It had no discernible head, just those 2 hypnotic, burning red eyes that seemed to pierce right through them. Panic seized Roger. He slammed his foot on the gas, peeling out onto the highway, leaving the creature behind. Or so he thought. As they sped down Route 62, Linda glanced back and screamed. The creature was airborne, effortlessly keeping pace with their car, which was now pushing over 100 miles per hour. Its wings didn't seem to flap, it just glided, a silent, menacing shadow against the night sky. The rhythmic thud of their own hearts was the only sound besides the straining engine. Every time they took a sharp turn, they'd hear a metallic screech, as if its wings were scraping against the roof of the car. It followed them all the way to the city limits of Point Pleasant. Only then, as the first streetlights appeared, did it veer off and vanish back into the sprawling darkness of the TNT area. Shaking and breathless, they drove straight to the Mason County Courthouse. They burst into the sheriff's office, their words tumbling out in a frantic, jumbled mess. Deputy Millard Halstead listened, his expression shifting from skepticism to concern. These weren't troublemakers, they were genuinely terrified kids. He knew Roger Scarberry, knew he wasn't one to make up wild stories. So, he followed them back out to the TNT area. The night was quiet, the air still. There was no sign of the creature, but an eerie, static-like hum seemed to hang over the place, a strange interference on his police radio. They found nothing, but Deputy Halstead couldn't shake the feeling that the kids had seen something real. News of the sighting spread like wildfire. The next day, the Point Pleasant Register ran the story, and the local press conference was packed. A reporter, trying to find a catchy name for the bizarre winged man, dubbed it the Mothman, after a villain from the popular Batman TV series. The name stuck, and with the name came more stories. The night after the Scarberrys' encounter, another resident, Marcella Bennett, had her own terrifying run-in. She was visiting friends who lived near the TNT area when her car seemed to die. As she got out with her baby, she saw it. The same gray, winged figure with glowing red eyes rose up from the ground beside her car. It unfurled its wings, and she was paralyzed by sheer terror. It felt like an eternity, but in reality, it was only a few seconds. In her panic, she tripped and fell on top of her own child. The creature just stood there, watching, before it took to the sky and disappeared. She was so frightened she claimed she couldn't remember how she got back to the house, only that she was pounding on the door, screaming for help. The sightings kept coming. 2 volunteer firemen saw a large bird with red eyes. A man named Newell Partridge, who lived near Salem, about 90 miles from Point Pleasant, had a strange experience around the same time. His television screen went dark, filled with a strange, swirling pattern. His dog, Bandit, started howling on the porch. When Partridge went outside, he saw the red circles in the darkness of the field, like animal eyes, but there was no animal shape attached to them. He shone his flashlight, and the eyes seemed to reflect the light with an unnatural intensity. Frightened, he went back inside. Bandit, however, shot off into the darkness, barking furiously towards the red eyes. Newell Partridge never saw his dog again. The next morning, all he found were paw prints in the mud that just stopped. It was as if Bandit had been plucked straight out of the sky. The people of Point Pleasant were living in a state of constant, low-grade fear. The TNT area, once a place for teenage dares, became a no-go zone. People started locking their doors earlier, keeping their children inside after sunset. The Mothman wasn't just a story anymore. It was a presence, a shadow lurking at the edge of town, a pair of red eyes that could be watching from any dark corner. The sightings weren't just fleeting glimpses. People described the creatures circling their homes, peering into windows, and swooping low over their cars. The red eyes were always the most prominent feature, described as being hypnotic, almost trance-inducing. Witnesses felt an overwhelming sense of dread, a primal fear that went beyond just being startled. Strange things began to happen all over town, things that seemed connected to the creature. Phones would ring, but there would be no one on the other line. Just bizarre, high-pitched chirping sounds or deep, guttural growls. People reported seeing strange lights in the sky, what would later be called UFOs, hovering over the TNT area. And then came the men in black. Mysterious, official-looking men in dark suits would show up at the homes of witnesses, asking questions about their sightings. They weren't police, they weren't FBI, and they often seemed to know details about the witnesses' lives that they shouldn't. They would warn people to stop talking about what they saw, sometimes with thinly veiled threats. This only added another layer of paranoia and conspiracy to the already tense atmosphere in Point Pleasant. The encounters with the creature itself became more and more bizarre. A contractor named Paul Bonnet was driving past the TNT area when he saw something huge take off from a field. It was so big it looked like it was struggling to get airborne. He described it as a giant, gray bird, bigger than any he'd ever seen. Another couple claimed the Mothman landed on the roof of their car, its weight causing the vehicle to dip. They could hear its claws scraping against the metal as they sped away in terror. The fear was palpable. What was this thing? Where did it come from? Was it an animal, a demon, or something from another world? The questions hung in the air, unanswered, as the sightings continued to escalate. The town of Point Pleasant was bracing itself, feeling like they were on the verge of something terrible. They didn't know it yet, but the strange calls, the men in black, and the terrifying winged creature were all building towards a single, catastrophic event that would scar the town forever. The worst was yet to come. As sightings of the Mothman continued to pour in, the initial shock and disbelief in Point Pleasant slowly curled into a thick, pervasive dread. What started as whispers in diners and hushed phone calls between neighbors became front-page news. The creature wasn't just a fleeting shadow, it was becoming a local celebrity, a terrifying one at that. People started reporting more than just sightings. They spoke of a chilling, high-pitched screech that seemed to echo from the sky, a sound that made their blood run cold. Others claimed to have their car electronics go haywire whenever the creature was near. Radios would fill with static and headlights would flicker and die, plunging them into darkness on lonely country roads. But the most disturbing development was the appearance of strange men, dressed entirely in black. They weren't from around town. No one knew them. They drove new, pristine black cars and moved with an eerie, almost robotic stiffness. Locals began calling them the men in black. They would show up at the homes of witnesses, often just hours after a sighting. They didn't introduce themselves as being from any government agency. They would just appear, asking questions about what people saw. But their tone wasn't one of curiosity, it was a warning. They advised people to stop talking about the winged creature. Sometimes subtly, sometimes with outright threats. They seemed to know details about the witnesses' private lives that no strangers should know, which made their presence all the more terrifying. It felt like the town was under some kind of bizarre surveillance, and the Mothman was at the center of it all. One of the most vocal witnesses was a woman named Mary Heyer. She was a journalist for the local paper, the Athens Messenger, and she became the unofficial archivist of the Mothman phenomena. Her office phone rang off the hook. People trusted her. They told her their stories. Stories they were too afraid to tell the police for fear of being ridiculed. Mary documented everything meticulously, the glowing red eyes, the massive wingspan, the strange sense of dread that accompanied every encounter. But her involvement brought her more than just stories. She began to have terrifying prophetic dreams, nightmares of a catastrophe looming over Point Pleasant. She dreamed of screaming, twisting metal, and the dark, cold water of the Ohio River filled with Christmas presents and bodies. The dreams were so vivid, so real, that she would wake up in a cold sweat, her heart pounding. She wasn't the only one having these premonitions. Many of the people who had seen the Mothman reported similar feelings of impending doom. They couldn't explain it, but it was a heavy weight on their souls. The creature, they felt, wasn't just a monster. It was an omen, a harbinger of something terrible. The men in black became more aggressive in their warnings, and some witnesses reported strange phone calls with metallic and human voices on the other end, hissing and clicking. The sense of paranoia in the town was palpable. People started avoiding the TNT area altogether, a place that was once a popular spot for young couples and thrill seekers. Now, It was a place of fear, a place you didn't go after dark. The sightings peaked throughout 1967. The creature was seen perching on rooftops, swooping low over cars on the highway, and staring into windows with those hypnotic, glowing red eyes. The fear in Point Pleasant was no longer just about a monster in the woods. It was about something much bigger, something that felt inevitable. The town was holding its breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. The Mothman sightings, the men in black, the prophetic nightmares, it all felt like it was building towards a horrifying climax. They just didn't know when, or how, it would strike. And then, on the evening of December 15, 1967, the unthinkable happened. It was a cold, busy Friday night. The Silver Bridge, the main artery connecting Point Pleasant, West Virginia, to Gallipolis, Ohio, was packed with rush hour traffic. People were heading home from work, doing last-minute Christmas shopping. The bridge was a symbol of the town, a steel giant that had stood for decades. But at around 5 p.m., without any warning, a single, critical eyebar in the suspension chain snapped. A deafening groan of tortured metal ripped through the air as the bridge began to tremble violently. In less than a minute, the entire structure buckled and collapsed into the icy waters of the Ohio River below. Cars, trucks, and people were plunged into the freezing, dark depths. The scene was one of absolute chaos and horror. Screams were swallowed by the roar of collapsing steel and rushing water. For those who survived the initial plunge, the frigid river was a death sentence. The final death toll was 46 people. The town of Point Pleasant was shattered, plunged into a state of collective grief and shock. In the aftermath of the tragedy, a chilling realization swept through the community. The Mothman sightings had stopped, just as suddenly as it had appeared 13 months prior. The creature was gone. It was last seen by a few people on the bridge just moments before the collapse, as if it was a final, silent observer to the disaster it had seemingly foretold. Was the Mothman trying to warn them? Was it a supernatural sentinel? A creature from another dimension drawn to the energy of an impending disaster? Or was it the cause? A malevolent entity that brought the tragedy with it? The questions hung in the air, thick as the river fog. The official investigation concluded that the collapse was due to a structural failure, a tiny stress crack in a single eyebar that had grown over 40 years. But for the people of Point Pleasant, for Mary Heyer and the dozens of witnesses, the explanation was far more sinister. They believed the bridge's collapse and the Mothman were inextricably linked. The nightmares, the sense of dread, the glowing red eyes, it all finally made a terrible kind of sense. The creature wasn't just a monster, it was the herald of death. The story of the Mothman became a permanent, dark scar on the town's history. A chilling reminder that sometimes the things we see in the shadows are not just figments of our imagination. They are warnings. Thank you so much for watching part 2 of our Mothman story. What do you think? Was it a warning or the cause of the disaster? Let me know your theories in the comments below. A huge shout out to all my Ghosttery subscribers. You guys are the absolute best. Your support means the world. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next dive into the unknown. Stay spooky, and I'll see you in the next video.